Well, welcome. How are you doing today? This is Ed Reiner with your daily dose of mind stuff. I want to welcome you and for joining me today. Today we are going into the next segment of You Were Born Rich. This is segment 4, session 4, and this is the 3 planes of being. So for us to truly understand ourselves, we have to understand that there's a higher nature to ourselves. We are not this physical body that we see. We are much higher than that and have a much more power. So today's session, about 30 minutes long or so. We're going to get right to Bob. And let me get you set up. And like always, I will see you guys in a moment.
I was fortunate enough to be on a program in Chicago at a Human Resource Congress with a gentleman named Frank Goebel. Frank Goebel had been an aerospace engineer. He was the president of an aerospace company. And one day he was working on his budget, and he realized that 65 cents out of every dollar revenue coming into that company was going back out of the company again to employees for either salaries or benefits. And he suddenly realized he knew virtually nothing about people. Here he was spending 65% of all the revenue on something he knew virtually nothing about. He said, I knew an awful lot about engineering, and I knew a fair amount about aerospace, but I knew very little about people. And so he said that he decided he would study some psychology, and fortunately for him, he ended up collaborating with Abraham Maslow. Now, Maslow made a breakthrough, the like of which is maybe only made every few thousand years. He had come to the conclusion that you and I have infinite potential. He's written a paper. He left aerospace engineering, and he went on to start the Thomas Jefferson Research Center out in Pasadena. In a paper called The Productive Person, Goebel wrote, by nature, you and I are alike. By practice, we get wide apart. There's the difference in our results again. Now, he said the difference between the most dissimilar characters, between the real achievers and the non-achievers, for example, seems to arise not so much from nature as from habit, custom, and education. He went on to quote William James, who concluded that we use a very small part of our real potential. And James said that most people live, whether physically, intellectually, or morally, in a very restricted circle of our potential being. We make use of a very small portion of our possible consciousness and of our soul's resources in general. Much like the person who out of their entire bodily organism would get into the habit of using and moving only their little finger. I want you to think for a moment, if you had a child and that child was laying perfectly still in its crib, and the only part of its body it was ever able to move was its little finger, I'm quite certain that you would probably beg, you would borrow, and if you had to, you would steal to find out what's wrong with that child. But isn't it strange that a human being can stop growing mentally at a very early age, and it can be virtually ignored? This is, without question, one of the most important subjects we can go to. I want to refer back to something Napoleon Hill wrote again that caught my attention when I first read the book. He pointed out in here, somewhere in your makeup, there lies sleeping the seed of achievement, which, if aroused and put into action, will carry you to heights such as you may have never hoped to attain. You know, as I think of this and as I read it now, I'm doing things today that 27 years ago, if anyone had suggested, I would have thought they were hallucinating. I take a look at my paycheck today. It's so completely different than it was when I first started to study this. In fact, the same people that used to pay me $4,000 a year are now paying me $4,000 an hour. And the only thing that's really changed is what's going on inside. Everything was already there. It's just a matter of learning how to use it. Now, he said, just as a master musician may cause the most beautiful strains of music to pour forth from the strings of a violin, so may you arouse the genius which lies asleep in your brain and cause it to drive you upwards towards any goal you may wish to achieve. Now, I'm going to put a couple of marks on the board, and I want you to really think seriously about this. You know, human organizations, as we know them today, are not going to last much longer. And that is because we have built them on a false premise. These organizations have been built on the premise that you and I are physical beings, and we're really not. We are spiritual beings living in physical bodies. And we've been gifted with something called an intellect. And by learning to use the intellectual factors in our personality, we can tap into the higher side of our own nature and improve anything in our physical world. But you know, to the average person, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And it may not make a whole lot of sense to you, as I just said it. But you're going to find as we go along with this, and as we keep working with this idea, it's going to make an awful lot of sense to you. Now, I have found when we start to study ourselves, there's only 2 points of reference we can go to. One is science, and the other is theology. There doesn't seem to be anywhere else to go. I have found that there are only 6 basic religions. Now, I spent quite a bit of time living and working in California. I think there's something like 4,000 religions in California, but everybody starts their own out there because there's tax breaks, you see. But you're still going to find there's just 6 basic religions, and they all teach us essentially the same thing. They teach us that we are non-physical beings. They may use a different word, but the concept is the same. You know, it's a strange thing. Most people don't even know much about their own religion, and yet they say mine's right and all the rest are wrong, and they don't even know what the others are. I have found that every one of them has the truth in it. We are non-physical beings. See, the truth is something like the center of town. It really doesn't matter which side you approach it from. When you get there, you're in the same place. Now, the other area that we might want to look at is science. Science tells you your energy. As a matter of fact, a DuPont scientist many years ago said that the electrons and the atoms of your body contain a potential energy of more than 11 million kilowatt hours per pound. Do you know that there's enough potential energy locked up in that thing that you're sitting in that we call a body to light up this whole North American continent for nearly a week? And then you'll hear people say, I haven't got any energy. What a ridiculous statement. That's all we are, is a mass of energy. Do you know this thing you're living in vibrates? It glows. As a matter of fact, there is an aura of energy around your body. That is the cells leaving your body. Your body changes at the rate of about 50,000 cells per second. And as the cells leave the body, new ones are created. And you know, you can photograph the energy leaving the body. Semyon Kurlian, way back in the early 30s, perfected a form of photography where he could take and photograph mass, and the rays of energy coming from the body would penetrate the camera, penetrate the film, and you'd actually catch it on the film. And you'd photograph the density and the color of it. I would imagine you're very familiar with this, are you, honey? That's right. And you know, as the image in a person's mind changes, the vibration of their body changes, and the density and the color of this energy changes, and changes dramatically. Do you know you've even got a mental faculty where you can start to feel that energy coming from a person, and you can determine the mood they're in very, very quickly. You can virtually read what's going on inside an individual. Now, as we study this, we're going to find that this side and this side is actually all hooked up. Think of this for a second. You see sitting here on the lectern a glass of water. Now, let's stop and think about this for a moment. We call that glass. It's actually energy. Because of the speed it's vibrating at, we call it glass. We call this water. That's what it is. It's water. But it's actually energy too. As a matter of fact, the ring that's hitting it is energy, and the finger that the ring is on is energy. Everything's energy. Everything vibrates at a different speed. But stay with me here for a moment. What we're talking about here is energy. Now, while the energy is in the vibratory rate it's in that glass, we're going to call it water. And we call it water because it's vibrating at a physical or a corporeal state. If you were to add heat to that energy that we call water, you wouldn't call it water anymore. Then you would change the terminology that you would use. It'd be the same energy, but it would be moving faster in a higher speed of vibration. Then we would call it steam or vapor. And we would call the energy steam or vapor because it's not in a physical vibration. It's now moved into what we call an astral vibration. If we were to continue to add heat to that energy that we now call steam, you wouldn't call it steam any longer. You would call it air, ether, or gas. And that's because it's not in an astral vibration any longer. It's moved into now what we call an etheric vibration. But every level, it's the same energy. Now, as we take a look at this, we're going to let these lines represent levels of vibration, or as we more commonly refer to them as frequencies. And you know, each frequency is hooked up to the one above and the one below. There's no line of demarcation where one stops and the other starts. See, every frequency, it's like the colors of a rainbow. As they fit together, there's no place where one color stops and the other starts. They're all joined together. Now, you're never going to see that with something you call sight. Sight is a physical sensory factor. You have to go to one of your higher faculties and you develop this through understanding. You start to understand. So you see, the part of us that we cannot see and the part we can see is all the same. This is just the flip side of the coin of this. Spirit always manifests through its polar opposite. We have the ability right here to tap in to this great power that I choose to refer to as spirit, and we can tap in with an intellect, and we can cause this power to literally move into form, into something we call an idea. That idea must literally move into something we refer to as results. You see, both science and theology clearly indicate nothing is created or destroyed. The only thing you can do is cause it to change. Now, this particular program is about prosperity. And when we think of prosperity, money plays a very large role. But of course, so do relationships, and so does the health of our body. But let's go back and think about money for a moment. Now, when you think about money, money is really an idea. You say, that's money. No, money is an idea. It's manifest on paper. Now, paper used to be wood. I remember when I was a little boy, I lived way up in Michipicoten Harbor. That's about 3 wigwams this side of the North Pole. It's a little north of King Garden, I think. But at any rate, when I lived up there, I'd watch them take these large logs out on flat cars on the railroad. And I remember people telling me that they were going to make paper out of it. I thought, how do you make paper out of a tree? It didn't seem to make sense. Well, you alter the vibratory rate of the energy that's called wood, and pretty soon it's called paper. And then you put ink on it, and now we call it money. Now let's think about this money for a moment. If it can be neither created nor destroyed, it must already be here. If we can't destroy it, if heat will cause the energy that we call water to move into an etheric state, I would imagine heat would cause what we call money to move into an etheric state. And there it goes. Now, where is it? You say it's gone. It's not gone, still here. You see, you'll never see it on the level it's on now with your physical sensory factor sight. But if you use your intellect and develop understanding, you'll know that it's still here. What we want to do is cause it to move into form. Now, that's just about as bizarre as anything you'll ever hear to some people's ears. But I'm going to tell you, it's just as true as anything you'll ever hear if you understand natural laws. And what I'm talking about is moving your mind into a higher vibration, developing a higher consciousness, and you can literally attract all the good that you want. You see, money is literally attracted to us, or it's repelled. Now, in the first 27 years of my life, I can assure you that I was not magnetized to that green energy. It used to stay away from me, and now it just keeps coming to me. What did he say in this book? Right in the start of it, he said, when money starts coming, it'll come so fast and so furious, it will literally make your head spin. Now, let's take these simple concepts that have deep meaning, and let's take this other board here and build a picture. One of our intellectual factors is imagination. Another one is reason. Now, with reason, we have the ability to think. John's going to be talking about that a little later on. With our imagination, we can tap into this infinite power and we can build beautiful pictures in our mind. Now, since no one has an image of the mind, we have to make one. It's like the little boy in school. He was sitting there doodling away, drawing a picture, and teacher says, "What are you doing, son?" Kid says, "I'm drawing a picture of God." Teacher says, "Nobody's ever seen God." Well, he says, "Wait till I finish the picture," I heard about a gentleman that was running a seminar in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was living and working in Chicago at the time. I, at the time, was prepared to go anywhere to try and find out why I changed. And Vancouver was not too far to go from Chicago. I always sort of laugh when I hear a person say, "Oh, if you hold one of these seminars in the east end of the city, I'll come, but I don't want to drive across the city. I'd walk across the continent if I thought I could get something that would help me understand me better, because I know it's my understanding of me that's going to determine the results that I get in my life, in my happiness, in my health, or in the area of wealth." Well, I flew off out to Vancouver, and I had heard many speakers. I'd read many books. I had a ton of information running around my head, but I couldn't get it to fit. And I couldn't get it to fit for the same reason that some of you have never been able to get it to fit. You have no picture in the brain cells of the mind. Do you know there's many psychiatrists that have problems with their patients because they're not giving them an image to work with when they're working with their mind? I have taught this idea to psychiatrists. I had a psychiatrist, Marty Cohen, out in Century City, California, tell me that he made more headway with a patient in 4 visits than he had previously made in 4 years. And the simple reason for it is he gave them order. He gave them a picture to start to work with. Well, as soon as this gentleman got up and started to speak, he was a great big gentleman by comparison to me. He and I looked like Laurel and Hardy when we worked together. But at any rate, the second he got up to speak, I knew this man knew what he was talking about. And I'm going to tell you, I listened carefully. I went over when he was finished and I asked him, I said, "Could I spend a couple of hours with you?" And I'll never forget him looking at his watch and telling me that he was sorry he didn't have a couple of hours. He had to go and catch a plane. Now, he said, "I'd love to spend some time with you," but he said, "I've got to catch a plane." And I said, "Well, I've got to catch a plane too. I don't mean right now." And I said, "Where are you going?" Or he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going home." He said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Chicago." Well, he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I come out to hear you speak." He said, "That's a long way." And I said, "Not for what I got." So at any rate, I think he was impressed that I had traveled so far. He got his calendar out and I got mine out. And he told me he was going to be in Toronto in a couple of weeks. I said, "Well, Toronto's only an hour from Chicago. It's just up and down. I'll come over if you'll meet with me." Well, the two of us sat down in the Skyline Hotel. And I'm going to tell you, Leland Bell Vanderwall taught me as much in 2 hours. Well, I should say 2 days. No, it wasn't. It was 2 hours. We just spent a couple of days together. But everything fell into place in just a couple of hours. He taught me more in 2 hours than I had learned in 9 years, studying faithfully every day. And he proceeded to tell me, he said, "Listen, Bob," he said, "there's a difference between hearing and listening." He said, "You hear with your ears, you listen with your emotions." Now, he said, as you sit here, he said, your mind could take a trip, but your body would stay right in front of me. Now, he said, you'd hear every word I'm saying, but he said, you may not necessarily be listening. He said, if you're going to learn, you're going to have to listen. And you listen with your emotions. You've got to keep your mind with your body, no trips. Now, I said, if you do that, odds are pretty good you'll learn. And he says, there's a vast difference between learning and gathering information. He said, you see, all the way through school, we were encouraged to read, remember, and repeat. Read, remember, and repeat. And if you were able to do that fairly well, you were given the mortarboard of the sheepskin. And they said you had learned. Doesn't necessarily mean you've learned anything at all. You might have learned how to develop your memory, but that might have been the end of it. Now, I'm not saying no one learns doing that. Some do. But he said learning is not gathering information. Learning is when you consciously entertain an idea, you get emotionally involved in the idea, you step out and act on the idea, and you improve the results in some area of your life. Now, he said, this is the name of the game, Bob. He says it's results. Pretty good teacher a long time ago said, by their fruits, you'll know them. In other words, you can always tell a person's level of awareness by the results they're getting. If the results aren't there, they have no one to blame but themselves. For 27 years, I blamed everybody. I blame my parents. I blame my brother, my sister. I blame my employers. I blame the commanding officers I had in the Navy. It was never me, always them. They weren't doing enough for me. They weren't doing it right. The truth was, I wasn't facing up to the truth about me. I was never studying. I didn't know anything about myself. And as a result, the results indicated it. I was unhappy, sick, and broke. Now, he said, Bob, you're going to have to alter some ideas in your mind. But he said, to do that, you're going to have a picture to work with. And he told me about a doctor in San Antonio, Texas, Dr. Truman Fleet. He started the concept therapy movement. He said he attempted to teach the healing arts, and he ran into a problem. He said the medical profession that he was a part of were treating symptoms or effects. They were not treating causes. And he said, if you're ever going to enjoy health, you must treat the whole person. Now, that's called holistic healing. How many of you are familiar with holistic healing? Quite a few. Well, that's where you heal the whole person. You see, you're a triune being. You live simultaneously on 3 planes of understanding. Every one of us are the same. Every one of us. The difference is in our results, but the same here. And that's where it all starts. And that's what we want to understand. When we walk into that office where the broadloom is up to our cheeks and there's a great big oak desk and a battery of secretaries, that person is not that much better than you are. I don't care how big their car is, how much money they've got in the bank. I don't care how pretty they are. They're no better than you, and they're no better than me. See, our problem is we have been living strictly with our sensory factors and never with our higher level of understanding. If a person's skin is a different color, we say they're different. If a person lives on the other side of an imaginary line, we say they're different. If a person speaks a different language, we say they're different. If a person is a different sex, we say they're different. Are they? No. They appear different to our sight. But when we develop a higher understanding, we're going to find out that we're all the same. And when we start to grasp that, then we can start to take action on the results we want. As we see a person getting better results, we can watch and see how they're getting them, and then we can do what they're doing. Napoleon Hill says it pays to know how to buy knowledge. I'm going to tell you the best money you have ever invested is in this seminar. And I'm not saying that because I'm selling it or I'm done. And I'm not saying that because John's selling it or John's done. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that because I've studied thousands of seminars, and what we've done is take the very best out of them all and put them in this. When this was introduced to you early this morning, this was advertised as the most effective personal development seminar in the world today. It is, so far as I know. And I'm going to tell you, I've been to a lot of them. And it is because we give you a picture and then we show you how to change things. Well, Dr. Fleet said, if we're going to see health, we're going to have to give a person an image of the other side of their personality. And he said, since no one's ever seen the mind, I'm going to make a picture of the mind. Now, he said, let this represent the mind. Then he said, let this represent the thing that we've given all of our attention to now, up till now, the body. And he says it's this thing here that moves into action and causes the results that we get. If we're going to change what we do, or if we're going to change our behavior, we're definitely going to have to change what's going on in here. If we're going to change what's going on in here, we're going to have to understand how it functions. And as he pointed out, there are 2 sections to the mind, joined together, but different in their method of operation. And he referred to this as the conscious mind and this as the subconscious mind. Now, if you look on page 6 of your action planner, you'll see that drawing. The day Leland Bell Vanderwall drew that on the opposite side of a placemat in the coffee shop of the Skyline Hotel on Dixon Road in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, I'm going to tell you my life changed. I've put that drawing on the board thousands and thousands of times, and periodically when I do, I hear people snicker. But I'm going to tell you, if they stick around, they don't snicker for long. Because what it does, it starts to trigger all kinds of light in their mind. You've heard, let there be light, let there be a higher consciousness, let there be an awareness. Well, what we've given you here is a picture to start working with. It's not my picture. It's not even Truman Fleet's. It's our picture. The second you've got it in your mind, it's yours. No one can lay claim to something like this, but we can all use it. And we are all the same. I don't care how different you may appear to be to the person beside you, you and the person beside you are exactly the same. Now, it's understanding of how this functions that makes it different. Now, if you'll flip over in your exercise book, your action planner to page 8, and I would suggest that you follow this really closely. You could be sitting in your den or your family room and just watching this and the book stuck away somewhere. That'd be a terrible error. You'd be wasting your time. And you know, time wasted, you never get back. Now, of course, you only have to pay once, you see. If you've wasted the past, you've already paid the price. You don't have to pay twice. There's some consolation to it. But I would suggest you get the book out and follow me here. Now, you'll notice on page 8 and 9 are 6 drawings there. It's actually just 3 different ideas, or it's one idea broken down into 3 different parts. And as you take a look on page 8, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the body, there are some very key parts to that. On the top drawing on page 8, we say this is the part of your mind that thinks or reasons. This is where your free will lies. Viktor Frankl wrote a magnificent book called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who spent the war years in a German concentration camp. And you know, I don't suppose anyone has ever been subjected to more abuse, intellectually and physically, than someone in one of those camps. I certainly couldn't even imagine it, even although he wrote it very well. But he pointed out, he said, regardless of how they chained us and abused us, they could never take control of our mind unless we chose to let them. He did not choose to let them. Viktor Frankl was a courageous man. He's lived to talk about it. He's lived to teach about it. And I'm going to tell you, he's a wise person. That's where your free will lies. You don't have to follow anybody else. We say the conscious mind can accept or reject any idea. Now, there is no person or circumstance that can cause you to think thoughts or ideas you do not choose. They are the most important lines that you might find in this entire program. Now, what I'm going to do is run over a few ideas. And as I do with each part, on page 9, jot some of them down. Not what I say, but what it means to you. Now, let's understand this right away. What I say or what John says in this seminar is not that important. What you see us put on the board is not that important. The different little props that we may use, they're not that important. What's important is what you think as a result of something we may say or you may see on the board. That's what's important. There's something you want, and there might be one idea that we fire out that'll just trigger something in your mind, and away you go. And you can do anything you want.
Okay, so that was the foundation that Bob is laying for getting into the higher side of our being, which we'll go into tomorrow when we dive deeper into the actual image of the mind that Dr. Thurman Fleet introduced us to, or introduced the world to, that Leland Val Vanderwall gave to Bob and made everything just click. But he lays down in this session the higher side of our being and how we are living simultaneously on 3 different planes of understanding. And all of those are, like as Bob said, connected. They're like colors of the rainbow. You can't see where one starts and one stops. And I love the example he gives with the glass and the water and changing the vibration of the water by adding heat to it. We turn it to steam. And if we continue to add heat to that steam then becomes air, ether, or gas. Same energy, just different forms of the same energy. So what he's laying out here is as he says, is the truth. And I love how he puts the truth as like the center of town. He's like, the truth is like the center of town. It doesn't matter how you get there. Once you're there, you're at the truth. So we can come at this at all sorts of different angles, but once you get there, the truth is the truth. So that's all we're going to go on for today. We'll go into tomorrow. Bob's going to go into the next section, which he really starts to dive deep into the mind and the different workings of the conscious and the subconscious, and how our behavior is controlling our actions, and where all of that and how all of that process works. So make sure you join me tomorrow, and we'll be going over that, or Bob will be going over that. Super important. If once we grasp this concept, we can really start to use it to create the results that we want in life. So that's it for today. I wish you guys a fantastic day. I will see you tomorrow. This is Ed Reiner, Daily Dose of Mind Stuff. Peace. God bless.